Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and if you've been listening to my intros lately, you've been hearing about all of my bad luck. For example, one week, both of my car batteries died at the same time. So I had work done on both cars to get them back in driving condition, and then the next week, the car we just spent $1,000 on is totaled. Shit like that keeps happening. And the weird thing is that every bad thing happens after a really good thing happens, or vice versa. And I was hoping that my family would have one full week of nothing this week. So Ange came back from her Vegas vacation and she had an amazing time at the BravoCon. And then 2 days later, she takes Keaton to see Travis Scott, a sick concert, and really, life is good for us. Until the weekend, when I test positive for COVID. Ange also has it, and Keaton was spared the virus. The good news is that Ange isn't feeling any symptoms to go along with what she's dealing with. Me, on the other hand, I can't remember being this sick. I had 102.5 fever, my whole body was hurting, I can't taste anything, and everything smells like ammonia to me. It hasn't been fun, but it's almost comical, this string of bad luck. I will say that while I thought 2022 was the worst year of my life, 2022 taught me that life comes at you sometimes. But 2023 is really the worst year of my life by far. But enough about my problems. You hear about them way too much, and hopefully I'll have nothing to report in the next intro. But who cares about next week, when this week I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently. I've interviewed 6-time X Games gold medalist and 3-time Olympic medalist Nick Goepper back in 2016. And recently, he retired from slopestyle skiing and came out of retirement to make the U.S. halfpipe team, a feat that would be truly incredible if he's able to accomplish that goal. So I wanted to talk to Nick about coming out of retirement. And during my research for this podcast, I found out that Nick was living with one of the most outspoken and controversial pro skiers that a lot of you haven't heard of, Steve Stepp. Love him or hate him, Steve has a lot of personality, and I'm a big fan of how he rocks the boat at times. But I also know that not everyone likes a guy like Steve. But Nick has entrusted Steve to manage the Nick Goepper rebrand that is happening right now, and this podcast is going to be one part interview with Nick, one part interview with Steve, and it's the best of both worlds. One thing that I should mention is that while it's not bad, and you may not even notice it, my voice does sound a little bit different when I was interviewing Steve Stepp. That's because my dumbass had my directional microphone pointed the wrong way. While I hadn't tested yet, I'm betting that I had COVID already and that was affecting my brain. And it really is. Anyways, before I get into the podcast, I want to ask you to share my social posts wherever you see them and tell a friend about the show. Both of those things really does help the show grow. And finally, please, please, please support the amazing brands that make this podcast happen by checking out the new ads I recorded, going to their sites, and buying their stuff. The brands I'm talking about are Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's start things out with Nick Goepper.
Actually, let me just get a little bit more comfortable and then I'll be ready.
So I'm FaceTiming with Nick at the moment and I can see him taking off his shirt. He's getting a little bit more comfortable. A little awkward because not everyone does this, but it's okay. You just let me know when you're comfortable, Nick. I'm not going to tell everybody what I'm seeing.
All right, I'm ready, sir. I'm ready.
All right. So he's taking all of his clothes off. This is how Nick likes to podcast and whatever,
Yes.
whatever floats your boat.
Yeah.
But the last time you and I talked, it was right before your second Olympics. And you had mentioned that with your first Olympics, you weren't satisfied with the bronze. You wanted gold. And in my outro of that podcast, I was like, Nick will not win gold. He'll get silver. Were you bummed when I said that? And then after you took silver, were you like, whoa, Powell predicted this one?
You were the last person I was thinking about after my competition, but at the time, yeah, I mean, I'm always bummed if I don't hit the main target, but I love the journey, so honestly, not really. It was all good.
Well, I really felt smart about that one, and I didn't make a prediction for your third Olympics, but you got silver in that one too. And with both of those medals, were you able to enjoy the silvers, or was there any disappointment? Because when we talked before, you had said that the bronze was like, I mean, it was third place, and you really wanted to get gold. Were you able to enjoy those? Was it still fun, or was it like, fuck, I want to get gold?
Yeah, it was fuck, I want to get gold, but also, yeah, silver is dope. I mean, anybody who says that they're like satisfied with not winning, I think is lying personally. But again, like I'm very, on one hand, very result oriented. But on the other hand, I'm very enjoy the process in every step of the way. And I've learned that over doing this for over a decade. And, at the end of the day, like I know that every decision I make and every ounce of effort I put in is exactly what I want to do and exactly the kind of fun I want to be having. And so I live with very few regrets.
Okay, and then outside of Sochi, what was your most enjoyable Olympic experience and why?
I like the second one probably the most. It was my family was there again, and I was a bit more experienced. So just getting to soak up the Olympic experience with them there to witness it as well was quite a pleasure. This last one wasn't that great. COVID kind of fucked everything up and made it really difficult, a pain in the ass. Family didn't get to go. But overall, none of my Olympic experiences have really been that great as far as like joyous fun. Everyone has that misconception that like a highly competitive athlete goes to the Olympics and just parties the whole time and has the best time of their lives. And I think that's a fallacy.
Well, I feel like it's not that you go and party and you have the best time of your life, but it's like you go and you do your competitions. And then from everything I've heard and read, and you're a 3-time Olympic vet, so you can probably verify this or tell us if it's false, but it sounds like all the Olympians are having a ton of sex with each other and there's condoms everywhere. Is this truth or is it just a rumor?
It's true for the Olympians that are having tons of sex with all those condoms. Absolutely. I mean, I've participated once, but overwhelmingly, I haven't really participated in that Olympic orgy. So there's kind of like, I don't know, in my experience, at the Olympics, there's kind of two types of athletes. There's the ones that go to really compete and the other ones that perhaps are more there to enjoy themselves and enjoy the experience and aren't maybe as competitive of personalities. And I definitely fall into the former category.
Yeah, you're there to win. And I would think once you do well or you get 2 silver medals, which is something worth celebrating, and you're sober for both of those Olympic Games, which is great. You've been sober for like 8-9 years now. But when you are sober, what does the celebration look like?
I'm just always focused on something, whether it's a professional goal or a personal goal, whether I'm like installing a half pipe in my backyard at home or if I'm trying to, make like a video or like get some content for my next post or whatever. Like I love projects and I love getting on to the next journey, and I don't really celebrate. I mean, that's just never been my MO. I mean, you can ask my friends and my girlfriend and my family even, like I'm never really one to celebrate for more than like, I don't know, an hour. I mean, that's just not who I am, I guess. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, though. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy the fruits of my labor and I don't enjoy and completely, that doesn't mean I'm not fulfilled. And I think people get fulfillment mixed up with celebration, right? Like celebration is everyone's popping bottles at the bar and focusing on the achievement that just happened rather than I err more on the side of overwhelming fulfillment from everything put together rather than like one little notch in my belt.
Okay. And then these days, what's wild to me is that you are coming out of retirement. I mean, people retire for all kinds of reasons, but for you, is retirement all about burnout, like the repetitiveness of park skiing and the bruises and the expectations? Does all of that add up, and is that kind of why you're over it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It all added up. Just a combination of doing the same thing for a long time and my competitive personality and just having a fulfilling career and then also just not wanting to keep chasing the same thing all accumulated in the decision to retire from slopestyle and big air competition last January.
And when you stepped away, did you ski much or did you totally kind of leave the sport alone for a little while?
I fucking left it alone completely. After the Olympics, like 2 years ago, I put my skis in a closet and I rode my snowmobile for like 50 days in a row because I was over it. I didn't want to do it anymore. I think there at the end, like the last couple of years, the wrong reasons for skiing started to creep in, whether it was things other than fun and enjoyment being my primary goal. And not saying that like fun is a goal necessarily, but
it's important.
Yeah, it's important for sure. But yeah, man, it got really tiresome and I completely made an authentic and real decision to just be done on a high point.
When I think about most of the people that I have on this podcast, they are skiers first and then the competitors second. Like David Wise, Aaron Blunk, all those kind of guys. If they were ready to compete and it was a deep POW day, those guys would want to shred POW. They wouldn't even want to compete, but they have to because it's kind of what they do. But with you, and I could be wrong, but I look at you as more of a competitor first and then like a all-mountain kind of skier. Is that fair to say?
You're 100% correct. I'll tell you why that's more fun. Honestly, I can explain that, in my opinion. So I think I have more fun because the fun part of skiing is not my job. You know what I'm saying? So like, at least in the competition side, like I push myself and I'm in the competitive arena doing tricks and shit. But then in terms of any other type of skiing at this point in my career, it's purely for fun. And I get to enjoy it twice as much because there's no pressure to do it for any other reason other than it's fun.
All right. Well, talking about retirement, what's wild to me is that you announced your retirement on the day that the X Games start. So it's like a strange flex to me, as now there's like a retirement story when we should be celebrating the athletes of this year. What was the thought process with that announcement? Because I'm sure it wasn't like a strange coincidence.
No, definitely. It's just marketing 101. Skiing is in the forefront of everyone's minds, competition skiing, and I am the contest skier. So just made sense to make the most impact to do a post on the day of X Games. So, I mean, I've been sitting on that decision for a while, but it just seemed fitting to drop it right about then.
Did you go to that X Games or did ESPN make a big deal about it?
No, I did not. And I don't think they made a big deal about it, but I was at home and I was watching on TV, and it was actually a really kind of anxious experience at first because I didn't really know how I was going to feel. I was kind of like ready to feel really sad and bummed, and I wanted to be there and all that. But as I was watching the whole thing, I felt myself just like so excited for everyone else and such a fan. And I was like, wow, this is really fucking fun to sit on the couch and watch this. And that's kind of when I knew that I really made the right decision, is because I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything.
And then with retirement, there's a whole bunch of things I would think you need to do, like calling up your sponsors and let them know that you're stepping away. What did sponsors have to say about that? Did they drop you right away?
Yeah, so, all my sponsors, maybe 4 to 6 months before this, knew exactly where my head was at. And I was transparent with all of them. I said, hey, listen, guys, I'm not really focusing on skiing. These are my thoughts. I'm going to go rollerblading for the summer and try and compete in that. But, let's just see where it goes. And sort of left them with the message that, if you want to kind of hang on for the ride, then that's up to you. And if not, I get it.
Who hung on for the ride?
So right now, Vocal is supporting me. They've been supporting me since I was 14. And then my home mountain of Perfect North Slopes in Indiana.
So did Red Bull drop you? Because you really don't hear about people getting dropped from Red Bull other than Tanner Hall. They usually stick by their athletes and eventually they kind of fizzle out. But there was just a hard stop with Red Bull?
Absolutely. Hard stop. It was a 20-minute Zoom call one day, and that was it. However, it wasn't a hard stop because I really was not creating any value for Red Bull for months and months. And I even told them that, yo, listen, I'm really fucking over this. And so if I was Red Bull, I would not have considered me an asset anymore, and I probably would have made the same decision.
Fair enough. The way that you did your career, it seemed like you handled all your contracts on your own, and a lot of those contests were incentive heavy. And did putting the added pressure on yourself for earning money with incentives help you do better in contests?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a boost. And I love economics and capitalism and all that. And when you incentivize somebody to buy a house if they win the X Games, then that's an extra motivator to land that triple cork or whatever. But like I said, there at the end, I started to pay more attention to the incentives than the skiing itself. And that's when I knew I was kind of getting in trouble.
Did it ever bother you that your brands weren't really investing in you with a decent retainer? Because for them, having you on incentive is totally win-win. We have this Olympian, we don't have to pay him a lot unless he medals. And then if he does, we're happy to pay for that exposure. But then there's other people that even if they don't win, they get a check and they're always going to be generating some sort of exposure. But it just seems to me that you need a multi-year deal with a heavy retainer just to have that brand buying into you. And the way you were doing it, you're almost cutting the brand to break.
Yeah. I don't really know, to be honest, like what a heavy retainer versus a light retainer for a slopestyle skier is. And like none of us are making that much money anyways. So 15 grand versus 30 grand, like especially nowadays, isn't that big a difference. And I never really cared about, there was like a few years there when I was like, man, I should be making more money. I'm getting ripped off or whatever. But then I just let it go because like if you spend more time caring about what you think that you're worth, then that's just energy and time taking away from you actually building your worth. And at one point I was like, fuck this. Like, I don't care if I'm getting paid enough or not getting paid enough or whatever. I'm comfortable. I've got a house. I've set myself up. Like, I'm stoked. If I had twice as much net worth, like, great. Would I be any happier? Probably not. So I'm going to focus more on my personal life and my skiing and all the other shit that is going on because it's worth way more effort and time than thinking about money.
All right. Well, you mentioned that you had a house, and your house seems to be like a pretty cool dream type of compound. Can you describe the property and the toys you have on it?
Yeah, for sure. I got a little house here in Salt Lake City. That's in the suburb of Mill Creek. And when I was looking for it, I was looking for a nice sized lot. And I've got a nice sized lot with, enough concrete to like skate on and a little detached garage for toys and stuff. And the house is not huge. It was built in 1949 and it's very reminiscent of the house I grew up in back in Indiana. And it's kind of minimalist. And so, when I have people come over, it's very intimate. We get to know each other and there's plenty of room to just kind of fuck around in the backyard. And it's perfect, man. I'm living the dream.
But when I meant toys, I'm like, don't you have a ski ramp and a mini ramp and a bunch of different things just to play on?
So I had a bunch of toys. I've deleted a few of them. I have one toy. I have a trampoline. I got a motorcycle too. But yeah, I had a mini ramp. I had like a 5-foot mini ramp for rollerblading, skating, and BMX. And I had this huge dry slope ski drop-in rail thing that I built before the Olympics to practice switch ups. And it was awesome and totally worked. But yeah, I've torn down a lot of stuff and I'm getting ready for backyard version 2, which is coming in the spring. So I'm hyped.
And you had talked about the inline skating, and I saw some posts where you were able to get yourself into the World Skate Games in Argentina. And I would think that's like a hard thing to get into. I mean, who else represented the USA with you at the World Games?
Nobody. It was just me, and it was incredibly easy to get into. All I did was send them an email and say, hey, I would like to do the World Championships of Rollerblading skate park. Can I join? And they said, sure. And that was it.
That is insane. So who else was there that wasn't a U.S. person? Was like Darko Giambi? I can't even pronounce that guy's name. Like those type of people there?
Yeah, so the French dominate rollerblading these days. They've got like the heaviest scene. So like Diaco Diaby, Julien Coudeau, and then there's like Roman Abrat, and then there's some Spanish guys. But the rollerblade scene, like I'm a rollerblader growing up and I love it and I love the sport. And it was super, super awesome to go down there to Buenos Aires and like see this community and these pros and that are so good that you don't even know exist because the sport is kind of niche these days and it's not as popular in America. And that was the experience of a lifetime for sure.
Did Takeshi skate in that one?
Yeah, he did. Takeshi Yasutoko did vert and he won by like 40 points and he's like almost 40 years old. But I remember watching him skate when I was real young and he came to a skate park in Kentucky and skated vert there. And, he was like hitting the rafters because he was going so big on the indoor skate parks.
I signed him to K2 at one point back in the day, him and Ato, and it was just amazing. Cool. Like anytime you're standing on top of a ramp and just seeing them go 15 feet over your head, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah.
So years ago, when your life looked perfect, you were battling with depression. And knowing that life is kind of full of highs and lows, when you decide to retire, how was it getting used to being Nick Goepper, the former pro skier? Did that affect you at all?
No, I never really was the former pro skier in my mind because when I retired, I knew I was over the routine, but there was part of me that was not over skiing. That was for sure. Like I had to just step away to take a breather. I never really felt like the retired because in my mind I was like, I'm not fucking retired. I'm just over it. Like that's really what it was, is I still want to do this. Being a professional athlete is the best job in the world. And doing what you love is incredible. And I was like, I'm not fucking done. I just didn't know what was next. I didn't know what I was doing, but feel like it was the most respectful thing to do for myself and all my supporters to not keep everyone hanging and just kind of have some closure.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break. And for over 75 years, Elan Skis has been building world-class skis in the Slovenian Alps. It's real skiers building skis with the highest quality materials in the world. And I'm not just saying that. Elan is not only known for skis, they also build luxury yachts, so there's no cutting corners on anything. It's all about delivering the best on-mountain experience to skiers all over the world. And while Elan has been killing it in Europe for decades, over the past 10 years, they've been building a cult following here in the States because it's hard not to love a playful ski that's rock solid underfoot and a ski that makes you a better skier. Their award-winning Ripstick line has proven time and again to do this and has a waist width for everyone, but that's not all Elan has to offer. Their brand new Playmaker series in waist widths of 101 and 91 have won all the awards, and they're the perfect tools for landing switch in the park or backcountry. So please do me and yourself a favor. The next time you demo a ski, try Elan and ski what I'm talking about. You can find out more about Elan over at elanskis.com. Next up is where I want you to buy your Elan skis from. Peter Glenn Ski and Sports have been getting people on the snow since 1958. They aren't one of the newer internet companies trying to take over the world with product lines and hotels. They do one thing, get you dialed in with the right gear for your adventure or vacation. They take pride in being the best at that. And whether you're experiencing the best-in-class retail experience or the 5-star rated website based on the almost 13,000 reviews they have, Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, and if you can't get the Peter Glenn experience in person, well, their website offers free shipping on orders over $49, a hassle-free return policy, and they'll price match. That's right. If you find something cheaper at a reputable dealer, contact Peter Glenn, let them know, and they'll match that price. If you like this podcast, please do that for me. To find out more about all things Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, a brand located right down the street from me here in Seattle, and the only brand I trust to keep my drinks hotter and colder than anyone else. Stanley is the best at this. I mean, they invented the category, and they are the all-inclusive brand that wants to outfit everyone's adventures. Stanley isn't going to sell you a $300 cooler. What they are going to do is offer you best-in-class product for a reasonable price. And these days, with ski resorts charging $30 for a burger, there's never been a better time to load up on Stanley's food storage supplies and save your family a lot of money by bringing your home-cooked goodness to the mountains. Whether you like them piping hot or ice cold, Stanley delivers. And while Stanley always offers a code for the best possible discounts to Powell Movement listeners, there won't be a code for the next couple weeks as Stanley has its holiday deals live on its website through December 4th. And you can save up to 60% off select items. To get the deals and find out more about all things Stanley, head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Retirement didn't last long for you, and I read somewhere and then I was reached out to by a PR person that you were coming back to skiing, but not the part of skiing that you knew and excelled at. You were coming back and you're going to try to make the U.S. Olympic team for halfpipe. Where did this idea come from?
Great question. So, as you know, I'm a rollerblader since I was a kid. So I'm used to riding skate parks. I also skied a year at halfpipe in 2016, or not a year, but 2 contests. I always loved transition riding, but I never committed to pipe fully because of the commitments to slopestyle and big air. I was at the Red Bull Play Streets last winter, and there was a quarter pipe in the course. And as I was skiing the course and hitting this quarter pipe, I was like doing some pretty big, good tricks. And I was like, dude, this is reminding me of half pipe. Like, what the hell? I wasn't thinking about the actual skiing part. I was thinking about the results, right? Like, what if I like switched to half pipe and then like won the Olympics and did this crossover and like, dude, that'd be such an epic story. And then I was like, all right, well, that's bullshit because that's not the reason to do it. I have to like it. And so I was like, I kind of want to try this and like see where it goes. And then the ensuing months were a series of half pipe camps and really me trying to dig deep into my conscience to determine if like, I was gonna do it for the right reasons. And so I went to Switzerland and then Mammoth and then Mount Hood. The first time I went to Switzerland, it was like I kind of went there and I didn't do any doubles. I just did like fives and nines for 2 weeks and just like shredded by myself, no coaches, no friends. I was there with some snowboarders, but it was just me and my headphones and this half pipe for like 2 weeks. And I was like, is this fun? And then by the end of that, I was like, that was pretty fucking fun. And then the next time I went and rode pipe was Mammoth. And that was kind of like the performance test. And I was like, I wonder if I'm going to be good at this. Like, I know it's fun, but is it also going to be fun and can I be good at the same time? So I was in Mammoth and I did all four doubles in like 2 weeks. And the tricks like from slopestyle to pipe translated really well. And I was kind of like, I'm pretty good at this, and this is pretty damn fun still. And so then I went to Mount Hood a few weeks later to kind of seal the deal, and I was like, I want to like double check that this is fun and I'm still good at it, and like I see a future here. By the end of Hood, I was like, let's fucking do it. So then I was like, I'm going to the Olympics again, and this is going to be fucking awesome.
Well, I mean, I would say this would be the equivalent of like Usain Bolt deciding that he wanted to win the marathon gold medal. I mean, just thinking about halfpipe and the risk level, to me, it seems higher than in slopestyle. I mean, you're going 15 feet out of a 22-foot pipe with no chill time in between walls. But then hearing you say that you have all four doubles and you had that in like a month or something like that, that is just ridiculous that you can do that in a 22-foot pipe in that short of a time. So maybe there is the bigger chance than I thought there was about you doing this. Because I was going to ask you what your trick vocabulary looked like and if you thought you were going to be able to do all four doubles, but you've got them. But I mean, if I'm setting the odds in Vegas, I would say that you're like the 1,000-to-1 guy to even make the team right now. And the David Wise or Burke Irving or Aaron Blanc or whoever's next in line, they would be the 5-to-1 odds person. In reality, what type of chance do you feel like you have to make the team?
I'm going to make it.
I like that. I mean, gunning for the Olympics, when I first heard it, I was like, there's no chance, which I've said a few different times. But while I was preparing for this podcast, then I found out you lived with Steve Stepp. And when I found out you two were living together, I thought to myself, this sounds like a Steve Stepp idea to get you publicity and almost punk the whole ski world.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, are you and Steve just fucking with people here, or is this 100% you're making the team?
It's 100% both.
All right, because Steve's pushing you. He's almost like helping you with your Nick Goepper rebrand. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, precisely. So Steve, as you know, and as the ski world knows, at least my generation and generations before, he's Mr. Trollin. He is infamous. He made waves with that series, and we've been living together for a couple of years, and he's been telling me, we need a rebrand, we need a rebrand, we need a rebrand. And he's been egging me on for years, and like, it's finally happening. Steve definitely is a huge inspiration because we talk about writing and comedy and storytelling, and we watch like shows together and just talk. We have an insane sense of humor. A lot of shit we say in the walls of my house should never leave the house, and we just have such a good time. And I've never really, there's been times when I've taken my self-promotion and marketing for my personal brand seriously, but this is really the first time I've ever made a concerted effort to build myself up to a point where I've never been as marketable. And a lot of it really is just me finally being confident, really expressing myself, and also just really leaning into my interests and my worldview, I guess.
And really, you having Steve as almost your style and personality consultant, and you describing him a little bit, isn't the best way to get to know Steve and his antics. So before I bring Steve on to ask you some inappropriate questions, I'm going to do a little mini interview with Steve.
Going around the table talking about our best experiences of the year.
What was your best experience of the year?
Well, so you had to say your highlight of the year, and then you had to say something about the person sitting next to you. But My two highlights were being in the next Warren Miller movie that just came out.
No way.
Yeah, I filmed a segment with two other skiers at Woodward.
That's the last place I would ever expect to hear you be, in a Warren Miller movie.
Oh, yeah, never. Oh, yeah, I thought you were going to make a joke about me never leaving the park, which is very true. But yeah, same. My name got suggested through, I don't even really know how it happened, but someone at Woodward was like, your name got thrown in for this Woodward Warren Miller park shoot. Do you want to do it? I was like, all right, probably never get this chance again, so.
Yeah, totally, man. That's one for the resume forever. You can be like, yeah, I was in Warren Miller, and, I'd be stoked if I was in one, so that's pretty cool. Well, we're going to jump into your life and times, and you were born and raised in Camp Hill, PA, I believe. What's that place like?
I mean, I had no qualms about growing up there. Compared to where I'm at now, it's definitely a quieter little town, not a lot to do, aside from we're lucky enough to live 20 minutes from Ski Round Top where I grew up skiing. But yeah, it's a small little farming community, a lot of super Catholic families. We grew up Catholic. One little funny anecdote I have is when I moved here, a lot of my friends from high school, they asked me, are you moving to Utah because you're Mormon? I was like, what is that? I had literally no idea. I'd never even heard of a Mormon before I moved here. I was like 17 or 18. So it was a pretty small Catholic farming area.
They just did it there. They didn't soak?
No soaking. No, the Catholics do it right.
Okay.
We party. If you go to the Catholic school, you're going to get into some trouble for sure.
Well, speaking of getting in trouble, you grew up with two brothers, and when I think of you, well, I don't know you. We haven't met before, but I know you and your internet persona over the years, and it seems like a kid like yourself could be, and it's one of my assumptions I'm going to make, one of those smart-ass kids who have an issue with authority, or at least an issue with the status quo. Is that fair of me to say, or is that just a bad assumption?
No, I'd say that's a pretty fair assumption. I spent quite a bit of time in the principal's office, especially me and my twin brother Kevin and younger brother Will. We were the Stepp boys. Everyone knew that we were kind of the troublemakers and probably put our parents through hell. Three loud, young, crazy kids into sports and skateboarding and rollerblading and anything you could probably get into trouble with. Got suspended once. That was a very fun memory of mine. I think I've never seen my mom more pissed off and disappointed in me.
What did you do?
I don't want to go into any gory details, but this was before cell phones, obviously. I was in 8th grade, and a couple of buddies of mine, we were at a school dance, and we stole a bunch of single-use Polaroid cameras off the table and went to the bathroom and took pictures of our privates, our nethers, and it was actually me who inadvertently got everyone busted because I snapped one photo of my friend Matt taking a piss at the urinal, and he got identified, and he ratted all of us out. And it was my photo that gave him the evidence.
Well, I can see why your mom was so disappointed and pissed off. It's like, my son is a fucking idiot, and my son is a fucking idiot.
Yeah, that was definitely the single dumbest thing I think I've done in school. I luckily never got any suspensions after that.
And so you find ski racing actually at like 12 years old. How do you end up going straight into ski racing, and then how do you find your way into the park?
Yeah, that's crazy how you knew that. Yeah, so my uncle, Carl Cunningham, was a U.S. team race coach way back in the day, I think in the 80s. And we had no idea about skiing or interest in skiing. And he would come and visit every once in a while. And he's like to my parents, why don't we let the boys see what they think about skiing? And we went skiing with Uncle Carl for the first time. And it was on from there. So yeah, Uncle Carl got us into ski racing specifically, where we learned all our fundamentals. And for the first 2 years, parents wouldn't buy us skis. So we had to cut a special deal with the rental shop because our race practices were so early. So all three Stepp boys were ski racing on the race team with rental skis.
That's crazy.
For 2 years.
So you guys weren't the fastest.
Well, actually, my twin brother, Kev, he's a kick-ass skier, but he would dominate. So we were all like top of the class at the end of the first year in terms of racing and winning. But Kev would always just whoop everyone's ass. Yeah, so after that, maybe second or third year, round top, they always had a half pipe. But for the first 3 years of us being at round top, it was a no skiers allowed policy until we saw some of the older guys kind of forcing their way in. And then they made a new rule. Skiers are allowed, but you're not allowed to have poles. So no poles if you want to ski the pipe. And so we would watch these dudes like doing 360s out of the bottom of it. And the very next year they had their first rail and a couple of tiny little jumps. And that was the year we started skipping race practice and destroying our skis.
And eventually you get really good at park skiing fast, like really fast. And I think back in the day, when you meet the pretzel king of Pittsburgh, Tom Wallisch, who's also a Pennsylvania kid who's like your age as well, you know, I would think probably your biggest contest result ever. I haven't really researched your contest results, but you took second place to Tom Wallisch in a rail jam. Is that how you meet him?
Yeah, so we met at a preseason rail jam in November, and I was winning all the local events, and there was a couple other skiers who were my age and pretty good. But then Tom showed up, and he was doing all the same tricks as us, and we're like, wait, who the hell is this kid? So as soon as the contest ended, we like became instant friends. And then for the rest of the season, we would kind of trade off at each other's parents' house. I would go down to Wisp in Maryland and stay with Tom for the weekend. And then maybe the next weekend, him and Warnick would come up and stay with us. And so, yeah, back then, finding another park skier in your state where you didn't even know that other resorts were into park skiing or had rails or anything, it was a big thing.
It was like Fight Club, right?
It was more of like, this guy likes to do what I do, and there's not many of us, so we're going to be friends.
Totally.
Yeah. But actually, quick correction, I think my biggest contest result is I won the Boreal Jurassic Rail Jam in 2006 or 7, I think.
Nice. Okay, I did not know that.
I had to get that on the record.
Yeah, man. You've got to win. You know, you might as well take that right there. And there were some other real people skiing in that event, right?
Yeah, I whooped Tom's ass.
There we go. So, while you've always had talent, when you see a guy like Tom back then, is his talent undeniable back then, or were you guys on the same like level playing field with the same tricks?
In high school and, yeah, through high school, we were pretty neck and neck. There were some things he could do that I couldn't and vice versa. And a lot of people watch those older videos and people say, oh, you were so much better than Tom back then. But I always have to correct him because I think Tom always did have a slight edge over me in the beginning. It was pretty close. And then when we moved to Utah together in 2006 to go to the U of U, that's when, I don't know, something just clicked in his brain, like Robert Johnson style, where he just overnight seemed to have figured something out. And he started doing stuff that the current pros at the time couldn't wrap their heads around. So it was like a night and day thing. As soon as we moved to Utah, he was just figured something out.
So you guys end up going to the University of Utah together and your roommates there. And the whole world is kind of lining up for you because I think you're there for like 2 weeks or something. You meet the 4x9 crew. And that's probably the most pivotal thing to happen to your ski career. I mean, these guys are already putting out content and people know who they are. And is it total blind luck that you meet those dudes that first semester?
Yeah, it's like the universe just connecting us. So we all kind of knew who each other were. They knew Tom and I from our Round Top Riders videos. We knew their videos from, I want to say, years before, but we were all connected through New Schoolers. And Tom and I did a few contests on the East Coast in high school, like the Young Gun Open was one of them up at Stratton, Red Bull Schooled. And we saw all these guys that we knew from the videos and, you know, we're like, oh, these dudes are so sick. And one of the guys we'd actually become friends with in those contest years was Jeff Kiesel. And it was actually Jeff Kiesel who showed us around the dorms and was like, hey, these 4x9, they call themselves 4x9. They're crazy, and their dorm is like right next to yours. So I think within 1 week, we were partying with Timzilla, AJ, and Napes, and that's when we decided to fully immerse in the 4x9 world. And that's when the Quad XL tall tees started coming out.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and even before Outdoor Research started sponsoring this podcast, I was rocking a lot of their gear, because nothing else I've used before holds up in the brutal weather that the Pacific Northwest delivers. Everywhere you go in the PNW, you're going to see a ton of OR gear, and that's because the locals know that while other brands may spend a lot more marketing dollars, OR keeps you drier and warmer every time, and that's what it's all about. Well, it's also about looking good. And while OR used to be all about technical mountaineering gear, and they still do that, they've changed a bit. They've hired new designers and partnered with some of the most incredible athletes in ski and snowboard, like backcountry legend Mark Abra, world champion freeskier Troy Podmilsack, X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, and snowboarder Neil Provo, who are making sure the new fits look as good as they perform in the elements. You can check out all things OR over at outdoorresearch.com, and when you check out, enter the code TPM25. That's all caps and the number 25 with no spaces, and I'm going to save you 25% off your order. Sale items and pro products are excluded. My final sponsor, and one that's a daily driver for me, is Best Day Brewing. They are hands down the best flavors in non-alcoholic beer. That's right, life isn't all about drinking too much. It's all about having your best days ever, and to do that, you need something that won't slow you down. That's where Best Day comes into play. It has all the flavor of your alcoholic beer, but none of the alcohol. Meaning you can have a few, and then you can drive yourself, your kids. You can drive anyone, anywhere, because you're going to be clear-headed and ready to go. I'm not telling everyone to quit drinking alcohol altogether. Sure, a few beers can be fun, but now, when I drink alcoholic beer, I mix a few Best Days in to make sure that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm talking about. And if you're cutting out alcohol completely, congrats. Finding Best Day will make that easier than ever. And coming in at less than 75 calories, you won't be packing on the pounds like your regular IPAs do. Best Day is brewed for the doers of winter. The skiers, the snowboarders, the snowmobilers, the sled doggers, the ski bladers, the splitboarders, the racers, the snowshoers, and everyone in between. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. And if you can't find it at the store, you can always go to bestdaybrewing.com or find it on Amazon. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. In thinking about 4x9 and Stepp for that matter, I was at K2 at that point when they started blowing up, and I pretty much cold called AJ. I knew nothing about him really other than the videos that I saw on New Schoolers, and I was like, please take my money, I want to sponsor you. And he was just kind of like, okay, I'll put together a package. It was probably 2008, 2009. With Stepp, I was signing all the athletes. With 4x9, it was just like, hey, I want to sponsor that movie as well. And when you think about 4x9, what was the first project that really got them and you on the radar of every single kid on New Schoolers, where they all started getting really fired up on you after that first year or during that first year?
The first thing that really caught people's attention, it wasn't exactly our first movie called Look It Up, but it was the edits that preceded that. So I'll never forget our first day skiing in Utah, 2006, September 16th. It snowed for the first time. And we all went to the classic trailside rail in Park City and hit that. And being from the East Coast, having snow in September is like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So we started filming edits in September, October, and November, and we had 3 really popular web edits on New Schoolers. And, we were young, being obnoxious, partying, and skiing really well. And I think that's what really got people's attention, because when we released the movie, AJ, being like the mysterious genius, him and Andrew Napier put together the whole movie, filmed the whole thing. We did a series of premieres, and I just remember that those premieres were packed. We did one in Boston, we did 1 or 2 in Salt Lake, and I can't even describe how cool of a feeling that was. But before our movie, without those edits and the hype around 4x9, it was sort of a love 'em or hate 'em type thing.
The kids loved them. Everybody on New Schoolers seemed to be backing exactly what you guys were doing. Maybe the adults and the older people in the industry didn't understand it, but the movement of the young kids, what was happening, it was you guys and Stepp.
Yeah, exactly. We always considered Stepp like our counterparts because, like I was saying back then, if you meet someone in skiing in 2005 and 2006, you like kind of automatically become friends. So they did their thing in Colorado. We were doing our thing in Utah. And I think that was the first time the ski industry saw not just one, but two group of complete no-name skiers making full-length movies that, gave a run for the money of the current pros, was like kind of shocked the industry. And I think having stepped alongside us really helped push, I guess, the second wave of free skiing at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, between 4x9 and New Schoolers, they pretty much helped build your career. And while we know what happened to Tom and how his life exploded with content, comps, sponsors, and travel, what sponsors were you able to pick up?
So during that time, I think we filmed the first couple movies, and Tom was starting to get picked up by like Level 1 and stuff. And him and I both got on Amplid skis at the same time.
Okay.
So I had a ski sponsor, but the sponsor that really helped me out the most was actually Saga, who I definitely have some choice words for. But they were definitely far and away the best and most cooperative sponsor. When I came to them with this idea for my web series, at the time it was like I had no real plan for it, just kind of make something that I thought was fun and funny and engaging and maybe speak to some of the criticisms of the industry at the time. And they were like, yeah, you know what? Let's see what happens. Let's go for it. And then, after the first or second trolling episode, they were pretty much my primary support. Spy actually helped out quite a bit on each episode.
Andrew Thomas?
Andrew Thomas, yep. And there was a couple other, they went through a kind of a cycle of team managers during that time. But Andrew was definitely the first who was on board with what I was doing.
And he totally got it. He understood everything.
Oh, yeah. Maybe not everything, but he was good to give me like creative control. I'm sure some people at the time probably saw my videos and thought, what the fuck is this kid's problem? What is he doing? But that was part of the appeal to it, I guess. But yeah, I had a few good supporting sponsors, Saga definitely being the primary one.
And Saga was so big back then, literally and figuratively. Like, thinking of the clothing, it was like the brand that changed the fit of skiing for a while. And do you credit you and your crew to making every kid want to wear hoodies down to their shins?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah. So it was nothing really intentional. I mean, we were all super into hip hop and that culture and wanted to live that lifestyle so bad. And we always thought it was so cool to dress like that. And we sort of brought some of those styles into the actual outerwear as well. And then Saga picked up, I mean, half the 4x9 athletes were on Saga. And I think Saga did make some smart moves with who they picked on the team, because their biggest athletes from then until the end was probably Durchie and Wiley Miller, who were definitely more established.
They're mainstream.
They're mainstream, and they weren't as raucous and rowdy as us. So they had those two athletes to kind of fall back as a safety net. But then the rest of the team was like me, Kiefer, McChesney, Colin Collins, all the crazy kids at the time.
Was it strange seeing the power and influence that you guys had on young kids when you started wearing that shit and then you looked and everyone else is doing it? Was it crazy to you?
It really was, because, I mean, like I was saying, it was just something we thought was cool. And then we would go coach at Windell's or guest pro at Windell's. Like, we spent so many full summers down there. And every year there was someone with, a full Steve Stepp kit or a full Tom Wallisch kit. It was kind of weird, especially at the premieres. Like, I mean, we would sell t-shirts and stuff. No normal parent would ever let their kids wear.
Right.
And it would just sell. And kids would go nuts for it. And yeah, it was pretty strange at the time, but kind of cool to see the influence we had just by making ski movies with our own tastes.
Yeah, it's cool to be the idol of all these little kids, although you weren't thinking about that then. You were just doing your own thing. And you're always putting content out, and you always have sponsors. But was skiing something that made you enough money where you didn't have to work, or were there always like summer jobs to help pay for the ski season?
I made a decent bit of money from sponsors throughout the winter. I worked 1 or 2 days a week at a call center, and then obviously spent my summers in Mount Hood coaching, or probably the best summer I had there was under Saga payroll. running the events for Wendell's. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't great money, but it was enough to live. I remember one time over Christmas, my uncle, who has his own company and stuff and is just way too rich. But my uncle came up and asked me, he's like, how much money do you make? And I was like, oh, I don't know, like $1,000 a month or something. And his jaw dropped. Like he couldn't believe that I was out there by myself, just living below the poverty line. But to us, it didn't matter.
How much do you think the most you made from skiing is in 1 year? Like under 20 grand?
In 1 year, probably 20 grand.
Okay. And then since I know I'm going to get a great answer out of you because you already said that you have some choice words for Saga, what happened with Saga from your perspective, and are you still friends with any of those dudes?
Well, yeah, I'm still friends with Jeremiah. He was the team manager, token asshole, hard ass. If you didn't know him, you probably thought he disliked you. But Jerm's a great guy. Austin recently helped me out with something, but they got robbed. You probably heard about that. Their warehouse got robbed in Salt Lake, I want to say like 8 years ago at this point. But that really started the downfall of the company because they got stolen, I think, $300,000 worth of product, which they had some problem with the insurance on that. But even more so, it set them back for sales of that year and production of the next year.
Yep.
So without production, they had to do like one whole ski season of like reselling old stuff, which kind of put a hit to the credibility. And then after that, it was just trying to keep up, and it eventually didn't. They sold to a company called Global Brands Group, and they tried to run under a parent company, and I think that only lasted like a year. But my gripes are they owe me a lot of money still, and they did at the end of the company. And it was pretty much just one guy, the other owner of Saga. They said that they were selling the, quote, athlete debt, all the money they owed. And so the three top people who were owed money were Tim, Dirchie, Wiley, and me. And so I had somewhere around $13,000 or $14,000 from like 2 years of trolling, which were, in my opinion, my best episodes with like Zane Cushman and stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it in a second.
And I was fighting with them for a while to try and get any of that money back. And the other owners said he sold the athlete debt to this parent company and that I would be paid in full under that debt agreement. And it turns out they never sold that debt. They didn't even include it. So when they got sold, that was like 13 grand disappearing. And I don't even know how much they owed Dirchie and Wiley.
Well, that sucks for you. They're probably thinking to themselves, shit, we just lost 300 grand. This guy's pissed about 13. But you know what? Whenever you're owed money, it sucks. And I'm sorry to hear that. But they did help build your career. And they gave you the creative freedom to really do whatever you wanted with your trolling series. And you were making fun of everything, it seemed like. You created different personas, which you kind of just brought one up. But it was creative and it was funny. And your edits, while they weren't mean-spirited, they clowned a lot of things. And the one off the top of my head was the monster video. Can you describe that? And did you ever get a response from the Drinkwater crew?
No, actually, the most negative response I got was from Shay Williams. He was the
monster guy.
Yeah, monster guy at the time. He really didn't like that for some reason. People to this day still ask me, how was it when you were sponsored by Monster? So I guess I effectively tricked a generation into thinking I was actually sponsored by them. But it was no mean spirit at all, especially with that. It was more just being silly with a energy drink company. With right around that time is when those big energy drink companies started sponsoring skiers and snowboarders.
But you were flipping shit to the cool guys in snowboarding because they started Drinkwater crew because they didn't want to pollute their bodies with energy drinks. And then this was like a direct response to that almost, it seemed like.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting a little more backlash from them. I definitely got like some one-on-one negative interactions with the snowboarders in Mount Hood because that's kind of where the real territorialness happens up there. But I think maybe at one point the owner of Drinkwater made some sort of post or something.
Was that Austin?
Yeah, it was Austin or someone else. But I think for the most part, they didn't really interact with it too much, surprisingly.
And I would say all those edits, they earned you a ton of karma points on New Schoolers like no one else, it seemed like. And if you think about what's your favorite, when your favorite clowning video or whatever in the trolling series, what do you hang your hat on?
Oh, I'm super partial to the most recent ones with Zane Cushman, this character I created as sort of the amalgamation of all the shittiness of park skiing, like the partying, the drinking, the smoking, the language, just the general attitude. And I guess maybe not one specific episode, but Cushman as a character has kind of taken on a life of its own. Like I remember I had 2 Cushman videos out, and Paul Bronstein, my filmer and friend, we went to Colorado to film the Abraham Cain one.
Okay.
And I mean, it was every single lap. We had to reshoot things so many times because there was people. I was in a totally different outfit, different skis, a helmet, which I never wear, and just kids screaming off the lift and basically interrupting all the filming we were doing, which was cool that they were that engaged, but it was like, dude, I'm trying to film another video and we have people screaming in the shot.
Well, I mean, the kids on New Schoolers absolutely loved you. It's like you could say whatever the fuck you wanted back then, and if someone said anything negative about you, you'd have 50 kids come up and defend you, which was quite amazing to me, I feel like. But when I think about it, there was a time when you were on track to become bigger than just a New Schoolers pro skier. I mean, you started getting shots in Free Skier and other magazines, and that was about it with the mainstream media. But looking back in like the prime of your career, or at least like, 2007 to 2014-ish, could you have been a bigger name in the sport if you approached it differently?
Yeah, I think about that. To me, it was always like approaching it differently meant giving up a little chunk of my personality and kind of creative vision.
For sure.
Me and Nick talk about this a lot. And one thing I noticed and still notice is skiers, maybe not even just skiers, but snowboarders, action sports athletes feel so at risk to show a more personal, silly, vulnerable side that they might say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and lose a sponsor over it. So it's safer to just not say anything at all. And so it was a mix of kind of wanting to retain my own, I guess, personal creativity, but also, I mean, at the time, right when I started making those Cushman videos, I started thinking, I can't do this forever. So if I treat it more like a passion project, like make my legacy the way I want to make it through these videos, through my characters, then in a lot of ways, it was harder to carve a career path for someone like me because sponsor risk, pretty much. Even Saga had to double check everything I sent them before it got uploaded. Re-edits all the time.
When I think about it, while you're different than David Lesh, I feel like there's some similarities in maybe behavior, like your online persona and antics just scared off brands and hurt your career just because people didn't know what to expect. You were that wild card.
Yeah, and I guess drawing a comparison to Lesh, his antics were a little more inflammatory, I would say.
Yeah, but both had shock value to them.
Yeah, shock value. I was always hoping to bring antics and shock value with a little bit of a message, I guess. Because every video I make sort of has a little bit of messaging to it. Something I want to say or something I want to criticize or poke fun at. Whereas Lesh would kind of just do shit to rile people up.
For sure. It's purely promotional and it's going to sell clothing and it's going to either you're going to love him or you're going to hate him. And while you might have had the love-hate thing as well, you were definitely not, I don't want to say he's mean-spirited, but there are things that he does that really does piss people off. And in thinking about some of your antics that I should call out, I think it was you who put the post out about skiers who took the PPP loans. Was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Did that piss off a lot of people and like pro skiers get in your DMs and be like, fuck you, man, and try to explain themselves?
No, because I think if they did, they would realize they were barking up the wrong tree. And I probably could have gone a little harder on them with that. In retrospect, I probably should have. I mean, there were some people who could make an honest argument for taking the PPP loan. I mean, I don't want to, yeah, so that's a gray area for sure. But to me, that's an example of me trying to have messaging involved, whereas, I don't want to just flame someone to flame them. And I always had a personal rule. If I'm making a video or poking fun at someone or something, that it's always going to be in good spirits and never malicious.
This is not malicious either. And I don't know if this is you, but I mean, I've kind of followed your career throughout it and seen some of the stuff you've done. Was it you who used to promote the use of kratom, which is like an herb that people get addicted to like an opiate?
Yeah, we discovered that in Mount Hood. And I don't think it was me promoting it. I think it was Napes. Napes made some Mount Hood kratom video way back in the day.
So that was one. How about Caroline Gleick? Did you really offend her a bunch of times?
Yeah, I think I made a post about her, something about, she was going on about like environmentalism or something.
Yep.
And then it wasn't me who found it out, but someone found out like her travel schedule or something. And I think we made a bunch of jokes about how she probably is hurting the environment more than she's helping it.
And then when you think of the funniest beefs or things that you've started with skiers or snowboarders that have a message or not, what's like your personal favorite or least favorite or the one that got the most traction?
Probably my Snowbird video. I mean, that one was just legendary in terms of the reaction. I remember that was the Zane Cushman Goes to Snowbird. And that was actually completely impromptu. Napes and Paul and I went up there and we had no real plan. The original idea was to go, because the character Zane was obsessed with Ahmet Dadali. And so Spy was running an event up there that they wanted us to do. So we signed some posters and we thought we could turn it into a video where Zane becomes obsessed with Ahmet. But we skied around the mountain all day and it ended up morphing into Zane shit-talking Snowbird and the resort itself and the people who ski at the resort. And that by far had the most backlash of any video, but it was the best kind of backlash. Bad backlash to me would be like putting out a video about park skiing or free skiing and it going negative. But this was me making clearly a satirical joke about one of the best resorts on the planet. And people still missing the joke and on Facebook saying, if I'd seen that piece of shit in the tram saying stuff like that, I'd kick his ass. And I'm like, bro, there were 60 people in the tram when I was saying that stuff. And guess what? No one said anything.
And I would think that's the shit you live for. Just when the joke is so good, they don't get it. I love it when people don't get a joke too. And pro skiing does not last forever. Are you still skiing for J Skis or anybody else anymore?
Yeah, so Jay's still supporting me. He's been so awesome over the last 10 years. He's always aligned with my creative vision and skiing and just the way I operate online. So after Saga, yeah, Jay's pretty much my sole sponsor, and I'm stoked to be with him.
And then these days, we know that you're living with Nick, and what do you do to pay the rent and bills?
I work as an IT manager and system admin at a company. I don't know if I want to say it
No,
here.
don't say it. Who cares?
I work full-time, and yeah, I'm in the IT world, tech world.
Full-time nerd, part-time skier, and that's pretty cool.
Yep.
And with Nick, I found out that he was living with you and that he was going to make a comeback to become a halfpipe skier. And my whole thought process was like, that sounds something like if he's living with Steve Stepp, Steve gave him that idea, and Nick's going to try to punk skiing. Is this all your idea? Like you're pushing him towards this? Like, dude, try to win a medal at halfpipe.
Well, I'm definitely pushing him towards punking as many people as he can. But the halfpipe idea was his alone. I even thought, purely logically, he got second at the Olympics, being the oldest competitor in the final field. He has just as good tricks as the best in the world. Why not hammer down on one or two new jump tricks? Because, his rails are obviously still top notch.
Yeah.
So to me, it makes more sense to learn a new rotation or something and throw it in a slopestyle run, something you're already a master at. But yeah, he pretty much got the idea, and he almost looked at it from like a business perspective of there's not that many athletes. It can't be that hard to learn, so let's go for it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not hard to learn 4 different doubles in a 22-foot pipe that you'll be 15 feet out of, and it's going to be interesting to see him do that. But the main reason I wanted to get you on this podcast is because a guy like you is born to ask inappropriate questions. And since you're living with Nick, this became the perfect way for me and the listeners to get to know you a little bit more and then have you ask the inappropriate questions. So that was the interview with Steve, and I was able to get Steve to put 3 questions together for you. And are you ready for question number 1 from Steve Stepp, a.k.a. your new stepbrother?
Don't make me increase your rent, Steve.
All right, I hope you do increase his rent. He said he's an IT guy in the tech world. He's making a shitload of money, and he's saving so much money living with you. And he's like, I could pay Nick so much more money, but he doesn't ask it. So maybe you should raise rent. But here we go with question 1 from Steve.
How did you feel when Kerry Miller allegedly stole $75,000 from you? Did it change your perspective of him?
So Kerry Miller is, I guess, a legendary person in the ski world. He's helped a lot of people have great careers. And are there things questionable in there? Who knows? But this question is about $75 that was stolen from you. Did that happen?
Yes, it did. So I had a mentor / manager for years when I was younger, from age 15 to age 20. And it was a very complicated relationship and mostly beneficial. And then one day my bank account was gone, and it was very awkward and weird and confusing, and definitely like very hard to fathom with somebody that you put so much trust in. And honestly, it's kind of like breaking up with a girl or getting divorced. Like, you share so many great experiences with this person who was like such a awesome part of your life, and then there's this like seemingly petty bullshit thing that happens, and it's fucking weird, and that's it. And then, Carrie and I unfortunately had a falling out, obviously, over that. And I was making enough money at the time that it didn't really affect me catastrophically, which was good. But yeah, I mean, I've pretty much forgiven him. And I actually saw Carrie like a few days ago at a funeral in California. And yeah, dude, it's just really weird. From a personal relationship standpoint, it's really weird. So very interesting circumstance. And I don't know what's going to happen with us in the future, but yeah, it's like I said, it's like you just breaking up with a girl or something, and you're like, man, I really love them, but fuck, that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, I would think you could never trust him again.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we'll leave that one there, and we'll go with question number 2.
Number 2, what is something in skiing or real life that truly scares you, or something about the future that scares you or that you feel unprepared for?
That's a great question. Something in skiing that scares me is probably like the backcountry, honestly. Like jumping off cliffs and shit, and like skiing down like stuff that's kind of unknown is very scary.
But that doesn't seem like your forte by any means.
Yeah, and that's why I don't do it. It's because I'm scared of it.
Okay.
But let's see. Something in life that scares me. I mean, failing. Like, I'm very entrepreneurial, and like I tend to take a lot of risk. And man, like skiing halfpipe, for example, like that is super fucking scary because I'm like all in or not in at all. And like, I'm going to go all the way or I'm going to quit. And the idea of only getting halfway or like getting halfway and then deciding like, I don't want to do this anymore, or I've invested so much in this and like I'm failing or something, is really scary. And I hate that. And so that's why I take so much precaution and time to figure out what I'm going to commit myself to is the right thing, because I fucking hate failure, and that scares me.
All right, well, we're going to jump into his final inappropriate question right now.
People love criticizing you for the rock throwing incident, but didn't it feel pretty good? And then follow up to that, to get away from a little bit of the silliness there, what are some things that people don't understand about that situation, and anything that you want to get out in the open?
All right. We talked about that situation back on our first podcast. You were like, 19, you were drinking, your friends had gone in, you just felt like throwing rocks at a car, and you got in trouble, and it blew up. It was like you were all over your local news, and eventually it became like a national thing, and that had to suck for you. But eventually you like kind of turned your whole life around. You went to rehab, you got help for depression, and a bunch of different great things happened. But to answer his question, I can't even remember what the actual question was, but do you have an answer?
Yeah, for sure. So just think about it like this. Like when you're drunk with your friends, like what's the most fun thing to do when you're a teenager is cause fucking mischief. You fucking toilet paper someone's house. You egg their front doorstep. You hit mailboxes. Like that's fun. You throw rocks at cars. Like that's just fun. Like not like gonna kill them, huge boulders, but to be a little prick, to be like a little fly or a mosquito. Like it's fun to get away with mischief, right? Well, at the time, like you said, Mike, I was very depressed and existentially in a crisis to the point I was suicidal. And I was having this evening where I was at a party and I was blackout drunk and I left and I was just wandering on the side of the road and threw a bunch of rocks at these cars. And at the time, probably had a good time doing it because I thought I was a fucking little mischievous asshole. And yeah, ultimately it was a cry for help. That's what that was, because I knew I wasn't going to kill anybody, but I knew I was going to make enough noise that somebody was going to like hopefully scoop me up and get me help because I wasn't courageous enough at the time to help myself. So ultimately that situation was a cry for help. And the only community that won't let that one down is new schoolers, but everyone else seems to have forgiven me.
Yeah, I think that you can see what you did to turn your life around. And yeah, thinking of it as a cry for help is like it was probably one of the best things that happened to you. And you're lucky it happened to you at that age because it would suck to be drinking for a lot longer and depressed for a lot longer. And who knows what could have happened. So you were able to pull yourself out of that. That's Inappropriate Questions. And that's the podcast. And really, you're trying to do something that's going to be so difficult to pull off, but it's going to be so interesting to see if you're able to pull it off. Because based on what I know about you, you have the heart, you have the ability, and it sounds like you have the tricks. And all you need to do is keep healthy and just have that drive that it sounds like you are laser focused. And there's a real chance that you can make this team. So I'm going to look forward to seeing what you do in the halfpipe this year. And I thank you for your time and wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. This is all about the interesting story. That's what I love about it.
So that was time with the Stepp brothers, Nick Goepper and Steve Stepp, and the rebrand of Nick Goepper is fully on. You'll notice him taking a position on his social posts, or I'm told you'll notice that. But really, the one thing you can't miss is that Nick dyed his hair blue the other day. So while Nick may have appeared to be one of the more cookie-cutter skiers back in the day, he's working on a more edgy look with this new rebrand. And the more I think of rebranding yourself, no one is going to care about these changes if Nick doesn't make the halfpipe team. It will be like, what the hell is going on with Goepper? But that's about it. But if Nick does make the U.S. halfpipe team and he makes the Olympics, the rebrand will become a huge story that will allow Nick to totally reinvent himself. And really, I could care less about his new image. I just want to see if he really has all 4 doubles and if he can drop them in competition, or if he and Steve Stepp are just punking all of us. I'm still not sure what to think about all this, but I will be tuning in to see if the publicity is more than just a stunt. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for the review of the week, and it's a 5-star review that comes from KBP27, and it's titled Best Podcast. Here's the review. One of the best podcasts and a great MC for any function. His interviewing skills and his interaction with our guests are so genuine and inspiring that you can't stop listening. Plus, his witty banter will leave you entertained weekly. Well, that is a short and sweet review of the week, and all of those comments that you made me feel really good about myself, so that made me read this one on the air. If you're hearing this, you're going to want to email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I am going to send you something from one of my sponsors. I believe it'll be something that'll quench your thirst and have you driving afterwards, so you can guess that it might be a non-alcoholic Best Day beer, which I highly recommend. They are incredible. But thank you again for that review. For everyone else out there, please star rate me and leave me a review wherever you listen to the podcast. If I do read yours on the air, you will get a special gift from one of my amazing sponsors. I want to thank you for doing that. I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want you to please support the amazing brands that make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.